Hello, and thanks for taking the time to listen to Reimagining Cyber. New episodes of the podcast drop every Wednesday. So to make sure you never miss a show, do hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen. You can also find us on the @Reimagining Cyber YouTube channel.
Hello and welcome to Reimagining Cyber. And this week, we're revisiting a topic we have only just covered, but something has changed. Because 2 weeks ago, we talked about Agentic AI and how it could become the next major security choke point. Since then, enterprises have started banning AI agents, security teams are scrambling to build controls, and we are already seeing early incidents that proves the risks are real. So today we ask the question, did Agentic AI just move from innovation to crisis? Well, with me, I have our resident cyber security expert, Tyler Moffitt. Tyler, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me back on.
Now, you were here just a few days ago talking about Agentic AI. Why are we back here already?
Well, a week or so is a long time in cybersecurity, and what we were talking about previously was more like theoretical and all the cool things people were trying to do, and not realizing all of the connectedness and through the APIs and the security implications of everything they were attaching to one centralized point. But it's now operational, right? So we talked about it basically could be a new security checkpoint, right? These systems don't just generate text like ChatGTP. They actually take actions. They hold API keys. They access internal systems that make decisions, right? And execute those workflows depending on what you told it to do, which many people are looking to do that because that seems to be the cool, sexy thing to do, which is fundamentally different from ChatGTP just answering a question you typed in, right? But since that episode aired, we've now seen tons of big names like enterprises restricting or banning, certain agent platforms, security teams flagging uncontrolled agent deployments, developers wiring agents directly into GitHub, Slack, Salesforce, production environments, and vendors suddenly launching like AI agent security features. I mean, this is moving way faster than governance could ever possibly hope to keep up. This is basically the sequel to that episode, and it came a lot faster than I anticipated.
So what changed in just a couple of weeks?
Yeah, big shifts happened. I guess three of them. First, going to be visibility. Basically, security leaders realized employees were already deploying AI agents without like a formal approval. They're just sort of playing and tinkering with it and not really realizing what they were doing. And this is not like casual use. We're talking about agents with like write access code to code repositories, agents that now can modify cloud infrastructure, right? Agents that can read internal documents, trigger automated workflows. I mean, this is not just, proof of concept experimentation. Like this is like literal production exposure. And so the second is like understandably control panic. Some organizations started just banning specific agent frameworks outright, because these agents are effectively like autonomous, and with decision making logic layered on top. And traditional security controls assume like it's all the user logs in, the user performs the action, the user is logs out, right? But agentic AI, at least in the way it's being played with now, doesn't log out, right? It persists. It's constantly looping. It changed the tasks, and that basically just breaks all existing security control models. And so that leads us to our last one is like the vendor scramble, right? Security vendors are now rushing to add, agent monitoring, prompt inspection, execution logging, agent behavior analysis. And so when vendors are like pivoting that fast, it usually means customers are nervous.
Tyler, we've had automation before, we've had service accounts before. What makes this worse?
Yeah, it's a good question. You definitely want to differentiate that. And I would say the difference is like the autonomy plus reasoning, right? So a service account executes its predefined instructions, like canned responses, right? An AI agent sort of interprets goals, breaks them into like sub tasks and routines, and then selects tools and adjusts behavior, and then iterates until it believes the goal is complete, right? And so that decision making, like layered on top of system access, and then you combine that with like super broad API permissions, likely poor logging, overprivileged credentials, like no guardrails on the tool selections that it's got access tool. I mean, we're in a new frontier now, right? We've created something entirely different. So I'll try and explain the risk clearly, right? So if talking from threat perspective here, if an attacker compromises, right, this environment, the API key, the underlying agent framework, the prompt injection pathway, or the model context, I mean, they don't just get access. I mean, they get automation at scale. An attacker no longer needs to like manually sort of explore your environment and case the joint. The agent will literally that they've just compromises will do that for them. And so that's like a paradigm shift in crisis, if you ask me. I mean, it's not about AI being malicious. It's about AI becoming like an acceleration layer for the bad actors who come in and now control it, if that makes sense.
So is this really an AI issue, or is this just identity security again?
I mean, identity is definitely the new perimeter, but I would say it's both. Agentic AI sort of exposes how fragile the identity governance and perimeter already is. I mean, if you think about it, most agents are using like static API keys, like long-lived tokens, broad OAuth scopes, and shared service credentials. And so, I mean, if you have dozens of these deployed across your company, you've like multiplied by God knows what amount of your attack surface overnight, right? And so most orgs don't even have like a centralized inventory of all the agents or clear permission boundaries for them or rotation policies of your tokens and keys or execution of audit trails. I mean, all this stuff is, yes, likely being talked about and governance is giving best practices, but how many people are actually doing it right now at the rate at which we're seeing the adoption? And people are experimenting and playing with this and giving it all this permission. So, yeah, I mean, identity was already the weakest link, but agentic AI has just like amplified it to the nth degree.
What about the platforms themselves then?
So, that would definitely be the second layer of concern. Many teams are sort of deploying like open source agent frameworks, rapidly evolving libraries, experimental orchestration tools, and if one of those tools or components or whatever is compromised, I mean, then you've got malicious or booby trapped updates like dependency injection, prompt manipulation, data exfiltration on a whole nother scale and definition that we've ever seen. Your AI agent is literally the attacker's like pivot point now. And that's what makes it, I would say, more dangerous than traditional supply chain attacks. Because they've sort of got everything that's like a criminal's wet dream, everything, all they want, ready to go, all the permissions and everything they would possibly need built in lateral movement. They compromise this. They can, as soon as they get it, they can query internal systems, summarize the findings, pull all the data they need. That like all these, usually at that point when they compromise one system, it's sort of a dwell time between pulling down all these other hacking tools, moving laterally, casing the joint, pulling out and finding whatever they need, right? They essentially like have all of this built into one thing that they compromise now, these agentic AIs, and it's sort of like automated reconnaissance, right? Automated persistence. And we've never sort of seen that, embedded level of autonomy in our infrastructure this quickly before. So it's definitely pretty scary for sure.
Now, there's nothing like a good crisis to drag podcast listeners into an episode, but are we in danger of overreacting here? Or is this genuine crisis territory?
Well, it all depends ultimately on what the actual adoption velocity is. I mean, you see a lot of these big names like Meta and stuff are starting to ban it, and they're like, "All right, we see the potential of catastrophe here." But if these agentic AIs can stay in like sandboxed environments, I mean, this is manageable, right? But I don't think people are doing that. People aren't doing that, right? It didn't. It's jumped straight into code bases and cloud infrastructure and all these internal knowledge systems and tools and customer databases and access to potentially customer information. I mean, it's it's a big problem, right? There's no sort of security model attached to it, and if there is one, it's certainly not mature. We don't have any sort of guidelines and governance really implemented at this point, right? So we have to sort of see one of two things. We need to see like a high profile AI agent incident that forces regulation, which I'm thinking is probably going to happen. Like the regulations got to come in, or I don't know, rapid enterprise hardening before something catastrophic happens. I wouldn't, I wouldn't count on that. I personally don't see rapid enterprise hardening before something catastrophic happens. Usually, this stuff like this follows the catastrophic something. So I think we're in the scramble phase, and that's what makes a lot of this feel like crisis. And people are seeing these big companies like Meta go through and just do blanket bans, and they're like, "Oh, okay, why are they doing that? They must know something." And I think something maybe already have happened internally at a lot of these places that they are now, questioning. Oh no.
So then, practical advice, what should security teams be doing, well, straight away, right now?
Yeah, so I mean, again, this is just best practice and what you should do. There is no like silver bullet here. We're dealing in a whole new paradigm shift, new ground entirely. But I mean, five immediate controls would be like inventory of every AI agent deployed, right? Replace static credentials with short-lived tokens. That's massive right now. The fact that people are just giving it, static level API access. Enforce least privilege on every integration. That makes sense. Zero trust your friend here. And logging, like log every agent action. So you can sort of provide justification or an audit trail of why it did what if you have some questioning as to some of the results that you got. And if you can, sort of sandbox capabilities whenever possible. I know that that's not what people are doing when they play with some funny new shiny tool. They don't really consider that, but consider it if you can. And I guess another way of looking at this, and maybe that's ultimately what we do, is treat agents like employees, right? Sort of onboarding, offboarding, access reviews, behavior monitoring. You wouldn't give an intern access to a production, so don't give it to an AI agent.
Finally, then, Tyler, what's the bottom line here? Sum the whole thing up for me if you could.
So, agentic AI, I guess you could say it didn't suddenly become dangerous. It just became really powerful. And then that power without governance is going to look like crisis. And so 2 weeks ago, we basically said that it was like a choke point and, a big problem waiting to be had. And it looks like these problems are being had and people are banning it. And now people are going, why, what's going on? So we're watching organizations realize essentially that they've built the choke point before they've built the guardrails. So this is not anti-AI. It's just, this is the required maturity for being, pro security posture, if that makes sense, because the organizations that get this right will move safer and faster, right? And the ones that ignore it they're going to learn the hard way for sure.
Tyler, fascinating stuff. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on. It's good to talk about this.
And you never know, when you come back on in a couple of weeks' time, there might be yet another development, hopefully not too scary.
Yeah, like ICBMs being launched by Skynet.
Oh, goodness me, please. No need for that kind of worrying talk. Anyway, thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Reimagining Cyber. If you enjoyed the deep dive, please do share it with your team. I don't know, the CISO in your life or that developer who just wired an AI agent into production. Like I said, Tyler will be back in a couple of weeks, but Rob Arago will be here next Wednesday with another fascinating interview with a leading name in the cybersecurity field. Goodbye.